Good afternoon, everyone. Wow. Are we on? Good. Okay. And we're on the web for those who have nothing better to do than to listen to me talk. So, I want to catch up everybody on various cornerstone things, as well as talk about the year-end close and ongoing continuous learning we have set up. So just getting back to, I often say we need to come back to why did we do this, besides the fact that we did merge two universities along the way, but building a single modern ERP system and the strategic goals around that, and which are ones that are not achievable in a single year or a single period, but over time, especially as we again are merging two universities and figuring out the best ways to move forward. Clearly, though, I want to say thank you to everybody who has contributed by identifying issues and bringing them to our attention, because only through that process and the millions of transactions that go through the system a month have we been able to diagnose and resolve things, and also know what we need to get improved along the way, either with the vendor or with our own business processes and activities. This is a big deal. This is we're going to be in this system for a long time. We're going to be in a continuous process with the vendor to improve the system. We've got partners with other institutions that are adopting the system. And we're vocal, and we have a voice at the table for doing all that. But there are always better ways to do what we have, and most of those are going to come as you're going through your daily activities and bring suggestions forward, as well as identify issues that we may not be able to see amidst the what is about. We see the forest and not necessarily the trees, and here we need to know the trees. If I'm mangling an analogy that way. So just some things about where we've come from in phase one activities. The budget system went live last October. The HR payroll data migration for RBHS employees went live or was basically done by the time we did the W-2s of the December, managed to close out December and have everybody in one payroll system. Expense management stabilized around January. Procurement took a long time to get through the backlog of accounts payable, but through Herculean efforts, we're at business as usual for procurement, and now spending the time to figure out what's the best processes and ways to use this thing within the procurement structure and with our vendors and with you all, our customers. There were many issues regarding subledger accounting rules that really had to do with grants and contracts, which were not transferring properly from the projects module to the general ledger. Those got updated in the month of May, and we continue to look for any errant ones that might pop up, and also how to, I don't know if the word simplify is right, but at least streamline how those things move between subledger and general ledger. And then grant and contract accounting, where we have a number of issues continuing, but some that were particularly an issue for RBHS grants and contracts having to do with award dates and expense adjustments from the opening balances were done in October. So, in May and in June. So the things that are still out there, and the things that we still ask you to look for or to help us with, there are still some things that are caught in suspense files. Now these are not by themselves issues with the system. They are normal, largely normal issues in terms of things that would pop into suspense because something's wrong with the transaction. And they're relatively small number of items, and some of them have to do, let me see, I should have had my cheat sheet here. Some have to do with interfaces such as between the Banner AR system or the student accounting system and things that did not post into Oracle correctly but are getting worked through during the year-end closing process. Those are pretty straightforward. We're not talking about expense issues or things that are not hitting the right places. Mainly there are some things coming from PeopleSoft, but again, those are ones that we actually would experience in the old system too, when part of the transaction was held up, even though the pay was made. So these are getting cleaned up through the normal process. Some of you may, if have any of those, have been contacted about that from Central Finance or from Grant and Contract Accounting. But systematically, there are not really any backups on those. This is the normal kind of thing we need to do. Occasionally, we will find something that backs up some problem. They have been relatively quick to resolve, like the one earlier this week where we had an issue with integrations into Oracle. That one, I was pleased to see, didn't take but a few hours to do, even though that was an inconvenience, but it was still relatively quick to resolve with the vendor and get those things running again. But the key here is taking a look at the transactions and reconciling them at a university level and at a detail level and bringing forward corrections that need to happen. So we are looking at transactions at a financial statement level. That we're getting assistance from Ernst & Young to look at them from an audit perspective and make sure that we have everything in the right place. But that still means that just like with the old system, you have to look at transactions and let us know when there are issues. The accounting from subledgers to general ledger, those, again, there were a series of subledger accounting rules that were really hanging up, 11 different ones that were hanging up thousands of transactions. Those corrections were made in April and May. But now and again, there still are things that are going to land in the wrong place, and we just need to, if we don't catch them, have them come to our attention so they can be fixed. But the systemic issues coming out of that have been resolved. The balances from the conversion, I mentioned before that, and this applied to RBHS and to a small number of RIOS accounts, were corrected. There are other elements I'll get into in a few minutes that are going to go through a longer process. We're down in terms of duplicate payments through the emergency process and issues around non-converted closed purchase orders. We're down to business as usual with those, and maybe a handful of things that still require some investigation and review. But again, they're ones that would not have been unusual prior to this system. Those things will occur on an ongoing basis, but we're pretty much in business as usual there. And then I'll talk more about reports as we get a little bit further along, because we have major efforts going on in terms of trying to get better information through reports to you. Any questions on this? Whoops. So these are the things largely being run through Pete Larson's office. Pete, there you go, controller. Okay. Actions you can take, bring them to find stuff, bring it forward. I mean, that's really what we need to know. If any of these areas that you have something that's an issue, bring it forward. Key here is processing the salary redistributions on a timely basis. I think I saw the report. Angelo, that we're all caught up on those? The salary redistribution.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, so, but it's important on an ongoing basis that those be kept up as current as possible. We're monitoring the suspense accounts. That's where, if things are landing there, they popped out, one side of the transaction hit, the other side didn't, they pop out. The staff will be contacting appropriate departments for figuring out what's going on there and resolving those. Again, we're back there to things that would have happened prior to this system on live. Again, duplicate payments, same thing, bring those forward. And all these slides, by the way, will be this afternoon. And then I'll talk about the reports in more detail shortly. So grant and contract issues. These are important ones to know the status of these. So when it comes to setting up awards with no compliance holds, there is a huge effort going on for within grant and contract accounting to get the backlog resolved. The target for early August is to have that down to a 15-day turnaround. Again, assuming that there are no compliance holds. If there are compliance holds for human subjects or animal, or what else would we have? A conflict of interest. If any of those could hold up something, but if something is clear, we're going to get down to that kind of a timeline. Again, this is a major push by Angelo's office and his staff to get these caught up, and we've been making really good progress on those so far. Yeah, so a lot of people from pre-award and post-award are applied to this to get through the backlog. I know that has been a problem for a lot of units. When it comes to RBHS accounts that were brought over from Banner, so there were some conversion issues on about 4,100 accounts. The expense conversion was fixed in early June. However, budget, revenue, and demographic adjustments have to be done one by one. Some of them have in fact been touched already, so it's not where we can just do a systematic update, because some of them may have been corrected because someone went into that award anyway. So the expenses are right, but the budgets, the revenues, and the demographic information will have to be reviewed one at a time and updated. So that's going to take some time, but we'll be caught up with that in a few months, and then get to business as usual in regards to those converted awards. Again, they apply to the awards that were converted from Banner, not from RIAS. Cash applied for grants, contracts, and clinical trials. That's this fall. It's not that we don't have the cash, it's applying it to the individual contracts. And I think here the priority is on the clinical trials, where the revenue matters, to the department. Whereas some of these other, if they're cost reimbursable, we have to correct it, we have to get it applied there, but it doesn't really matter from the standpoint of the lab running the grant. But those that do are being prioritized for that. Completing outstanding cost transfers, the SWRJs processed are done, are caught up business as usual, and the ones that were from the Banner system by July 21st. And by July 21st will mean that the June data will be updated, the June closing data on that. Again, I want to come back to reports because we have more detail on that in a few more slides. So want to pause here for questions. Yes, hi. And we're going to bring the mic around for questions because the people on the web.
I wanted to ask on the second item that units need to complete an approval form. Are we going to be sent that, or are we just supposed to know to initiate that? Or what is this approval form? Is it like the award form that used to be sent out?
So part of setting up a new project is to get your approvers set, I believe both in Oracle and in procurement. So I think we've started sending that out with it. I'll double check that, but there is a
That
note.
you would send it to us.
Correct.
for
So when
us
we
to
give
do.
you correct when we give you your award notice, you need to fill it out because it's the same procurement rules, purchasing levels and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it's going to be part of your setup email. Might as well hold it. Oh God. Sorry.
Thank you.
SWRJs. I have a few that I sent over back in April that are still not done. For hourlies that do not have combination codes.
For hourlies that do not have combination.
Use the,
Oh, for hourlies that do not. Whoa.
careful.
For hourlies that do not. Can you send me those separately?
We
there were-
did. I did it
You did?
again.
Okay.
I think it was Wednesday. We sent it to Nizam, I guess, the
Okay.
email, and I have not heard back.
Okay, we'll double check because there were periods where we couldn't enter some, and it's extremely difficult to enter those on our end. So I'll check if it slipped through the cracks.
And
or
also,
not.
there's a problem also with the FICA on that. Because sometimes there's a FICA that's still in suspense.
Right.
So what do we do with that?
Well, it should obviously follow the charge, so that's probably
It doesn't
correct.
follow the charge.
Yeah, exactly, but it should, right?
Okay.
So that's where the reconciliation may have to come into play.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're aware of that problem and you're working on it, or we should keep it as a reconciling issue? I'm not quite
I
sure.
wasn't aware of it. I thought it did follow where the person was charged, so that we may have to touch base with payroll on that one because I don't know how that flows. It should just follow the instructions.
Can you send
but-
those examples
Yeah, I apologize.
along to Angelo where it doesn't follow, and then we can,
Yeah, I'll stop by after this.
Okay.
Yeah.
other questions here? Yeah, right up here. Wait, let me get the mic to you.
We've been noticing that there are journals being made by Central that only hit at the UDO level, and we're sort of hunting and pecking to find those entries. And we're wondering, for example, most recently we discovered that the telephone charges in many cases were only going to the UDO level and not a project. Or in some cases, it seemed like our payroll default account was selected, but we've been trying to reach out to the telephone department to give the right project number and the right information, and we're also trying to get the details of the charges for those telephone bills. We used to be able to get them. There was a process that they were sent to the business managers and we disseminated that, but we haven't been getting that information.
Ideas?
A couple questions there. So Lucy, I think we talked about the telephone, right? And I put you in contact with the telephone department.
They don't
No.
respond.
They're overwhelmed.
They're overwhelmed. Okay, so yeah, they'd have to fix their programming for our interface. It's a monthly interface, right? So they'd have to fix their programming on where your charges are being directed. There's Beverly.
Chorus. Beverly Chorus,
Yeah.
and Wendy Wendell is for AT&T.
Okay.
But it's like, we're not notified that the entry is being made, so even at the time if it was made, if there was a general email that went out, it's just become such a process to hunt and peck and look for these things
Okay.
that it's becoming frustrating for the individuals who are trying to reconcile their accounts.
Okay,
Some
so,
people just forgot about their telephone, and now they're surprised that they have to pay for them, so,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, well, there was a backlog on all the bills because that was one of the last interfaces we put into production. So they sent like 3 months worth of interfaces, monthly interfaces, and then they just sent in the June interface. So I'll be the liaison between those, between the department and, the telephone department, IT, and
Okay.
you, and we'll get that resolved. So I think there's going to have to be an outreach to make sure that everyone's coding is correct.
Correct,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think that people are also looking for the details of what's being charged there, so that some of their bills look, like what was charged was too high, and they don't know
Right.
if it's correct, and they're having trouble getting,
Yeah,
you know,
as
the details.
After the interface is produced, they do send out reports, so you're not receiving the reports? Or
Correct.
you're receiving
We're
them
not
and
getting
delayed?
anything.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, so we'll
Let's
follow up on
follow up
that,
on
yeah.
that.
So did you have another question about payroll?
I have a question about the P cards.
Okay, but Lucy, did you have something else? Because you mentioned telephone, then you said something else, I wasn't sure.
The AT&T, it's the
okay.
cell phones
Okay.
that, for the AT&Ts,
Okay.
so it's the landlines and the cell phones both.
Yeah, well, you know, Mike had mentioned before that there are some suspense items from the interfaces, so from telephone or PeopleSoft or SAR or, you know, Banner AR, we still are dealing with suspense items. So I think they have $100,000 in telephone suspense still that hasn't hit the books. But, so your charges could be there, but you're saying you're pretty much getting, it's going to the wrong UDO. You're getting the charges to the wrong UDO. Okay.
At the wrong, where it's at the wrong project, and we're just trying to figure out, like, what was the basis, so
Okay.
that maybe we can do
Yeah,
a
they're
little
def-
less hunting.
Yeah, so sorry, they're allowed. They're definitely sending a project file and a GL file, so they definitely are hitting project accounts on telephone. So we'll just have to make sure that yours, which were converted apparently to GL accounts, go to the project account. So we can get that straightened out. Pardon?
My department hasn't had any charges at all,
Okay.
even at the GL level and the project level.
So maybe they're in suspense. Maybe they're in suspense, because
Okay.
I'm sure they're charging. You know, we've gotten the 6 files from them, so.
Okay.
And we just got the June file. We just processed it this
And
week.
also, the university P card is done at the general ledger level.
Yeah.
And when you fill out the form, you put in the project number and the UDO.
Okay.
But they're not charging that.
So who here knows about the P card from procurement? Well, being charged on the P card, I'm not familiar with it.
We have very
So-
limited number of P cards.
Very limited.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so can you follow up on that one? He's going to talk to you after this. We have so few P cards that,
Oh, there's a lot.
no, I mean, relatively speaking.
No, we use the
have-
university P card.
That's what
So
I
we're
mean.
charging, yes, and a lot of departments are charging them because the SiteQuest doesn't work.
Okay. Segments. Okay. All right. We'll gather that information. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, we're seeing journal entries being hit on non-grant accounts, and it's saying that the journal entries were processed by ORED, but we don't have any background on it, and we can't figure out who is processing them.
Where'd he go? You gave up and left.
I'm sorry, was that pre-award processing? Is that what you're saying?
No,
I'm
this
sorry.
this is for non-grant accounts. Like, these are 2 accounts that are, it's saying journal entries are being processed, and it's saying it's being processed by ORED. And so we don't have any background, we don't know why the charges are going there, and we've reached out to ORED, and we've reached out to GCA,
doesn't make
and
any sense.
Well,
no
if
one
they're
seems to
non-
know.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
wouldn't know
can we get your examples
Yeah,
and
Sure.
get them over here to
Send it
Pete,
to Tom?
yeah,
Pete Larson,
Okay.
our controller.
yeah.
'Cause
Or I would also
They shouldn't be
suggest-
cycling into that, and if they are.
But you can also try Charles Matthews back there in Overett. He's the business person.
Okay.
So if he's doing something on non-grant but that are related, he may know something about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Great. Oh, we've done this. Okay. Oh, yes.
Sorry.
No, that's why we're
Cost
here.
share, since we have them, we can ask, how do we fund cost share? Usually, previously, we used to do a JE to fund cost share accounts, but right now, we can't do a JE to a grant account departmentally to fund them, so we don't know how to fund a cost share account. Any idea?
Yeah, at least till we get to a different slide.
The way we had it initially set up, the grant account, the cost share were basically a companion account or a project account under that. And we found that you can't move revenue on the 8s because of the AR. So what we did was we set up a new series called it's a 9 series. So they act in parallel as a companion account, but they're not truly linked. So in that case, the 9 you could move the revenue in. So we clearly in the next RAIN meeting I need to
Okay,
do an
because the
instruction.
one that's already existing cost sharing that
It's-
we're trying
and
to
it-
fund,
ye-
so.
Yeah, it kind of goes into that account reconciliation. We have to
Okay.
basically shut those down, and any costs that have incurred, move them over to the 9, and then you could fund it properly.
Okay.
So reflect it, but,
Okay.
yeah.
Maybe you should just.
I don't know, I mean.
Okay. Okay, so some additional things that are being tracked. These are not really necessarily, they're consequences of the conversions and so on. Conversion corrections for non-sponsored accounts that came forward. Again, this is RBHS almost exclusively. Are going to be completed by July 14th. We concentrated on the grant ones first. Right now, those discretionary accounts are still sitting under the project module and the grant as if they're grants and contracts with GCA. There's going to be a cleanup and move of those in the new year to non-sponsored projects. They're going to be lifted out of there. That's a consequence of how UMDNJ handled those accounts differently from how Rutgers did, and they got converted over that same way. Those are going to be moved over, and these are non-sponsored projects. They'll be moved over into the non-sponsored projects module or components as opposed to where they now look like a grant or contract. So that's coming up. End dates. That has been pushed out so that transactions will post. There is a new field that's added to the Oracle system reflecting the true sponsor end date. That was a big, important piece for the community to have available. And then in regards to any delays in invoices and reports that are needed, contact with the sponsor. GCA will do that. But if there are ones that are an issue, please bring those forward to Angelo's team. Yes, ma'am.
Which report has the actual end date in it?
Which report has the actual end date?
We haven't found it.
It's not going to be in a report. The reports have to be redone because it's in a user definable field. So it's on the award screen and the project screen. And I'd.
Why are you putting it that it is?
Well, it is. It's in
It's
the
in the-
Oracle
it's in Oracle,
system.
it's just not in the
It's
report.
on the screen if you look at it. We're rewriting the reports so it'll be incorporated into that. But it's available on the record in the system
I can show it to you.
right now.
I'll come over. I'm over here first. I'll come over there.
It will be on the report. I'm talking about that, the reports that are under development right now. But that one is there. Others? Okay, now let's talk about reports and a lot of effort that we've got going on in this area. We all know that the reports have been inadequate, forcing use of queries and kludgy ways to get things out. Some are working, some are in place, some are under development. I'll show you those in a minute. In the short term, we'll continue to promote better use or more information about how to use the queries. We're working on custom reports. I'll show you those in a minute, the ones that are currently under development. And then the long term, we just delivered a set of requirements to Oracle 2 weeks ago about changing the screens and reports inherent in the system to better match how grants should be used or grants should be managed. This is something we did in concert with Vanderbilt, who is coming live in the system in January. They're very receptive. In fact, they asked for us to give that kind of input, and that input was put together through pinging a number of different labs and users of the grants module. So I'm hopeful of that, but I don't have a timeline yet on when those are coming through. What we do have under development are these reports that we've gotten a lot of feedback on in terms of certain developed needs. And as I said, all these slides will be available on the Cornerstone site this afternoon. So you don't have to take this down, okay? You don't have to take a photo of it. You can download it yourself. And they're going to be really, really, really tested, both centrally and at a unit level before they're released. But the two in regards to sponsored projects that are probably most important are those two, but certainly the project cost detail report and the unprocessed. Those are things that were very high on the list. So this is the timeline of when we expect to have these available. Again, that depends on the testing being reliable and the results of the testing being good. So far, so good on these things. We track this every morning in terms of progress on these, and the key is to get them out to you as fast as possible, but to make sure that they work. Yes, let's. No, we need that because there are people on the web who are listening in, so please take the mic.
For the encumbrance detail report, is that going to also include salary and fringe benefits?
Yeah, so there's a separate report that's maybe report 11 or 12. That's salary encumbrances, which will include everything related from PeopleSoft. But currently the encumbrance report that's similar to what we had in legacy system does not. So is something that you'd want combined. I think it's kind of very intricate to get the people detail that you want the encumbrance information from PeopleSoft to be combined with the purchase order information. So, but we can discuss. Currently, okay, in a summary level, it was okay. All right, so I'll take that back.
Yes. Yeah, understood. And there was and F&A. So, okay. After that. Questions on these? Okay. Just to update everybody on the year-end close. Again, these are the same dates that have been put out there before. Preliminary close of the project subledger and general ledger on the 14th, which is, if I get it right, tomorrow. And then a week to look at everything and then determine whether it's in the position to do a final close by following Friday. Between the 24th and August the 3rd, review of everything and closeout entries coming in on July 31st, and then reviewing and reconciling to make sure it's prepared for year-end close, which is on or about the 4th of August, with balance reports to be available shortly thereafter. We're doing this in concert with the audit readiness project that is both looking at the process of how conversion, reconciliation, and preparation for the final audit. So some of this may be subject to minor change depending on that process continuing. Anything else you want to add to it, Pete? If you all haven't met Pete Larson, he's the university controller who joined us a few months ago.
I just wanted to talk about AP because we were supposed to have a cutoff for the AP processing on the 7th, and we've continued to keep that open to get additional invoices in. There were a lot of invoices that were still pending approvals, other ones that we needed to sort through. I think we had a few thousand of those, but those are rapidly getting closed up. I think from the schedule, it looks like they'll be working through Friday and probably also on Saturday. We'll see where we're at on Monday with those. So you'll continue to see invoice payments being posted onto the ledger and the project ledger as we go through this exercise. So you'll want to keep an eye on your accounts and funds all the way through into early next week to do your reporting. And we'll take a look at it on Monday to see if we need to do any other extension. But we're hoping that they'll be pretty well caught up by the time we get to Saturday.
And while we're at it, speaking of AP and purchase orders, all converted purchase orders, all purchase orders that were blanket orders, right, that got converted are getting closed out.
When you say we'll continue to pay invoices, you're not paying new invoices because we've been processing purchase order after the end date, and vendors will be receiving item, and vendors are actually invoicing and it's getting paid, but we're assuming since the end date for the invoice payment was June 6 or 17, we're not expecting to hit this fiscal year. We're expecting it to hit next year. Is that going to be a problem for us?
Yes. Is that good? Really, all goods and services that were received by June 30th, 2017 should be part of the fiscal 2017 expenses, irrespective when they are processed through the AP system and actually paid. So if you had something that ends up not making the cutoff, we'll have to do an accrual for those transactions. I wouldn't bother to do accruals for $12.32, but certainly if you have things that are maybe subject to capitalization as you get to a threshold of $5,000 or more, I would check the ledgers or project ledgers to see if those expenses hit properly in the proper fiscal year, whether it's fiscal 17 or it's a new item that should now be in fiscal 18, because you may have something like that where you have an invoice for a software license that maybe the vendor billed you on June 20th, but it starts effective July 1st, so you should defer all those expenses. You shouldn't have them recorded as a fiscal 17 item either, so it'll work both ways. The controller office will do what we call a search for unrecorded liabilities. It's actually a process that parallels the testing that KPMG, our public accountants, would do during their year-end audit, where they look at all payments going out the door starting July 1st. They may have a materiality threshold, but they'll take a look at a sample of items that got paid, say like over $100,000, and if they'll check to see whether it was properly reflected in the ledgers for fiscal 17 or it's a fiscal 18 item. And we'll be doing that process ourselves internally before the auditors get there. If we find items where they haven't been accrued, or included into the ledger the proper year, we will accrue those at Central, okay?
That's a fundamental business change from how we've been doing it forever, is that right? So you're going to post something that's paid in July but was really delivered in June 17?
Yeah, that is if we didn't do it that way, we weren't doing our accounting right. That is the accounting rule you use. If you received it, it's yours. You have to expense it in that year. And so this is a process that will tie it in with the way it really should be done.
So how long are you going to keep June open for? The June 17 period?
No,
I get a bill that I get in November because the vendor sent it late. I get it in November, but the goods were
No.
received in June. When you pay it in November, you're going to open up the prior fiscal year and posted in
No,
June?
I can walk through that.
Yeah.
No, no.
Maybe I misunderstood what you said.
No, why don't I explain it? Basically, we're on accrual accounting, not a cash basis. So what matters to the university, it's an expenditure if we receive the goods or services before the end of the fiscal year. That belongs to the fiscal 17. Doesn't matter when it gets paid. It's that we incurred that obligation, by June 30th. It's that type of expense. Let
Hold on,
me
hold on, hold
finish,
on.
please.
Let him finish.
So if you had an expenditure and you went through a purchase order, a requisition, you acquired something, you had those goods and services delivered, but the vendor doesn't send you a bill in November, let's just say it's a material item, it's $100,000. You should put through a journal entry to accrue that expense. Irrespective of whether you've got an invoice or not, or whether it's been paid, you've got those goods and services, we incurred that obligation, those expenses are part of fiscal 17.
Now, the reality is, of course, that it isn't that clean.
No, it isn't. I know one more problem area that we would typically see in a large university with research is things like subawards, where, say, we've had Ohio State do something for us for all of the last fiscal year. They'll send us a bill in August for all of the prior fiscal year that we're getting paid in September. But maybe it's a $500,000 bill, the auditors pick that up, but they'll want to see that we accrued that in the financials. So we will make audit adjustments as long as KPMG is on site doing their field work. They have a professional obligation to continue to do those tests, and we will be doing those tests ourselves internally, and if there's material items, we're going to record those. If there's kind of diminishing returns, there's smaller dollar items, we're not going to bother because they're not going to materially misstate our financial
And there's a
statements.
point at which we have to stop, of course, because we have to close and we have to work off of that. And the adjustment would not necessarily be in the system, but be topside.
So when you accrue for it, you're going to post it to the project account, or you're just going to accrue for it on the higher level for your year-end financials? Okay, all right, so
Say that again.
you could have been doing that all along in the past, but it just never affected
We've
you.
always done search for unrecorded liabilities. That's been our common practice. Of course, now being in a new system and new business processes, it's changed from your past process that you're used to in prior years.
Okay.
But there will be a cutoff where your unit will not be hit. Okay, it'll be for financial statement purposes that we do an accrual.
Right, so you've done it on the higher level all along,
Yeah.
and it never hit on the account level, so I never saw that you guys were actually doing it, so I don't have to necessarily worry about it again going forward.
I think there needs just a clarification that once we close AP, they're processing as much as they can hit for fiscal year 17. Next week, we will have to evaluate and run some reports, probably on a threshold level. We'll have to determine maybe over $5,000, and we will still be hitting next week your units accounts up until maybe the 21st.
With an invoice or with an accrual? Are you going to hit my project account?
It would be with an accrual.
So-
You'd see the expense, but it would reverse in the following year. I will not have, I would like, we would like to
It'll
see an
reverse in
invoice.
July.
So, all right, so what are you going to determine that needs to be accrued or not? How are you going to determine whether something was delivered in June or whether it was delivered
By
in July?
invoices that come into accounts payable, we're going to get a report. They may not be processed, but if they've come in, we can review the invoice and see that the goods or services apply to fiscal year 17.
So then you're going to accrue it, and then you're going to revert, you'll post it in June adjusted, and you'll reverse it in July adjusted.
It will reverse in July 18, and it'll post in June 17.
All right, there's no July adjusted anymore?
We're- Correct. The July adjusted is only in the GL. There's no, June adjusted is in the GL. There's no June adjusted in projects.
Okay.
We will only use June adjusted in the GL for reporting financial statement adjustments, high-level adjustments.
Okay. So what happens if an invoice that comes in, let's say, August, that you didn't have and you didn't accrue, it'll just post in the next fiscal year normally?
If it comes in August, we will find it and we will have it for financial statement purposes. But by that time, the books will be closed for June. Your unit's not going to see it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is there a question?
If they know about it. If they know about it. They need to let us. Yes. If you know about something, you can contact the controller's office. We like to manage the accruals that happen for the AP process.
We heard a couple different levels for accruals. I'm inclined to want to accrue anything in the $20,000 range for our division, but I heard $100,000 here, and then I heard a $5,000 here. Do we have a definitive answer on that?
Yeah, I think some of those are a little out of context. The 100,000 that I'd mentioned was like KPMG might do audit tests, and when they do their sampling test, they may just look for items over 100,000. That's just their testing procedure. I think kind of as a general guide, I would say that if you've got an item that's $5,000 or more, you should try to accrue those because at $5,000 we end up with some items like equipment that would need to be capitalized, and that instead of having $5,000 of expense hit, it might be something to be capitalized, and we would just show the depreciation associated with it. So that's where we start to kind of getting a dividing thing. But if you have maybe a group of items that total, I don't know, $40,000, $50,000 for your department, and you want to put an accrual for that, and they should be reflected in the prior year, by all means, contact the controller's office and we'll put that through for you. The best advice I can give you, though, is to, throughout the year, especially at year end, make sure you get your invoices in timely so that they're properly recorded in the proper fiscal year. The reason why we're having kind of an extended cutoff for AP this year is because of some of the backlogs and complexities we've had with this current business year. But as we get into next year, we're going to try to have a pretty solid cutoff a few days into July.
And we recognize that there are going to be things that come in. We cannot control every vendor, and we can't control the subs or the subawards and that kind of thing. They're going to happen. We know that. So that's when the materiality and the top side gets into play. But as far as the transactions that are concerned, between what Christy and Pete said, that's how we'll be tracking. Okay. And we'll keep happy to take on any other questions. So a lot of attention, we've been able to pull some attention back to training and longer-term plan, or as we say, continuous learning, because there are foundational training that is still needed and being refined and being improved, because we have new people coming in every day, and those with financial roles or procurement roles or whatever need to be able to get that foundational work. But now the area of what we call in the intermediate, each of the finance system owners is working through what would be a right kind of curriculum based on feedback and discussion with users about courses that would help in terms of processing or business processes, use of the system, use of reports, whatever it might be. So those are the things that we want to develop over the course of the next few months and get them out and available to you. Again, it'll be a combination of training options, whether they be some in classroom, some webinar, some that are basically recorded and stored, or job aids that could be useful, especially as we develop and roll out these new reports. I think we'll be running a series of webinars on each of them, and it will be a series because there's going to be a lot of impact from some of those reports on the best way to use them. So that's where we're going with that. And then down the line, we'll be starting to develop some specialized courses for more in-depth for individuals that have particularly focused needs. All these are intended to really refine or focus on the new and updated business processes and the best path of using these. Again, a lot of those best paths are coming from users, the best way of doing certain things, or continuing to identify areas where we can improve the business process, or where necessary, like in the case of those things I mentioned about Oracle, where we can go back to the vendor and get something changed. Moving towards the certificate program as we go along, that shows some advanced development there. And then, as noted here, streamlined registration, one way to get everything instead of the two paths that was necessary before. Questions on that? A lot more to come there. And I should point out, this is a very much of a push. You know, I even spoke to the president this morning about this very piece. Very high priority for the entire group. And as we go into other systems coming up, that spend a lot more time planning in this direction to admit there's a bit of catch-up here, a fair amount of catch-up in terms of where we would like to be at this time. And the usual excess there. Let's see. I think that was it. So let's just open up for other questions. And can we get the mic around?
I've heard that the new payroll system is coming in soon. I'm asking for it to be pushed off at least till FY19, until all of these bugs are out of this system. RIOS took 2 years, that was one system. Payroll took 1.5 years, that was just one system.
So
Thanks.
it is not coming soon. And in fact, I cannot tell you when it is coming. So if you're all aware, do we have anything here about the HR payroll? Okay. So there currently is going on HR payroll business process review throughout the university. And the intent there is to identify the business process issues regarding any of the functions within HR and payroll as they now exist. And that's not only the processes, but where the things are done, whether that be in talent management, or whether it be in employee onboarding, whether it be in benefits, whether it be in payroll or reporting. So all of that is a precursor to a new system. We know what system we're going to go with. We've got that. But it's going to stay on the shelf until we have that piece done. And also align those processes with what the system will be doing and looking for gaps in between. Then we're likely to see that, unlike this system where we had to do, it wasn't possible to phase it. We had to bring it all at once. That we can do some phasing. And the last phase will be payroll, because that is one of the most complicated and the most impactful. So there will likely be HR, or as they call it, human capital management modules that come on in phases, in stages. And when that will be, you know, it may be calendar 19. Calendar 19. But that's just a guess at this point, because until we do the business process planning and then get an implementation partner and actually map out a project plan, that's just speculation. But it is really, really important that we do that in phases and stages.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to add that I'm Ruth
Identify yourself.
Stevens, Audit and Advisory Services. I just wanted to add that I've been participating in all the workshops for the HR payroll process redesign. So they really are taking a very thoughtful process to look at the business processes first, as well as the roles and responsibilities within HR and payroll, and coming up with lists of performance improvements, and then prioritizing those like short-term, medium-term, and longer-term. But the focus is more on, okay, what can we do now to improve communication, make sure people know what their role is, and things like that, so that once they get to designing the system, they'll have all those things in place. So they're working right now on some, like the short term being like one to 3 months, and then 6 months. So they're working on those improvements in the meantime.
Yeah, and as Ruth says, a lot of those can be done without new system. Richard, do you have anything to add? So the sponsors of that project are Vivian Fernandez and Richard Axe. For HR and payroll accordingly. This is a big deal to do it right. And it's similar story for a student information system for any who are interested about that. The business process work on student services is going on now, and a lot of that has to happen before we'd ever touch a system. We haven't even selected that system yet. So we're going to do that when it is ready. But anything we can do in terms of organization or business process prior to a new system, which is a lot, we will do. Yeah, right.
Do you know if tuition reports are still going out?
Do I have to know if tuition reports are still going on?
Tuition
I would
remission
assume so.
reports?
We have not changed the tuition system, so I would assume so.
Because I used to get a report, I don't get a report anymore, and if I want to move tuition from one account to another, it's not
Okay.
being processed.
Can we check on that? Okay. Right in front of you?
Hi, I recently had an invoice for $135,000 not paid because it had a shipping cost of over $500. It ended up being a hold put onto it, and I was told that that's automatic by SciQuest. Could we possibly get that changed from $500 to maybe a percentage of the invoice?
Actually, it is based on there's multiple tolerance levels, and obviously it fell into one of them. It's not $500. It's based on 4 or 5 different tolerance levels we came up with, which we can share with you if you want them.
Yeah, please. I mean,
Sure.
I didn't even know that was there, that an invoice might get held due to shipping costs. And when I contacted accounts payable, they told me it's a $500 limit across the system. So maybe you should let accounts payable know what the thresholds are, so when they share it with people, they can share the correct information.
Sure, and I'll get your name right after this.
I have another question. With managing expense items, when I go in there and I start scrolling down, because it's actually the only place I can see detailed information, it used to not happen, but it's happening more and more. When I try and scroll down, it freezes, and it says fetching data. And I scroll down a little more, it freezes and says fetching data. And so it's taking longer and longer to go through when I'm looking at the detailed cost and manage expenditure items. So I think anything can be done with that. And the other thing is it limits it at 500 rows. So if I scroll down and I have more detailed information than 500 rows, it doesn't bring the data in, it doesn't let me see it.
This is an expense report?
No,
Or-
this is managing expenditure items. I go into costs. I go into managing
Sorry,
expenditure
sorry.
items.
Sorry,
I'm going right
I
into it.
misunderstood you.
Yeah, it makes sense that as more data gets in there, the performance is taking a little bit of a hit, but you can also export directly to Excel,
Yeah,
which would be faster. Maybe you've tried that and it's still
Yeah, I
better.
can, but if I'm just trying to go look for something real quick, I don't necessarily need to export it to Excel. That's extra steps I have to do. That's extra time out of my day when I'm just going to look for something quick. I'm trying to make my life easier, not make my life harder.
Okay. The only thing I could suggest is if there's any way to narrow the search criteria at all.
All right. You can look at the performance issues there, too.
All right, I'll try that.
We'll look at the performance issues, too, on what we're seeing. Can you pass the...
Expense management. It's getting very sensitive now because if I, on the report, it rejects sometimes.
Oh, now this is yours.
That's for you. So when I go into to review an expense report, so what happens is I click the box to see like per diem, let's say. So then when I hit OK or whatever, it's very sensitive. It goes to reject. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to need some screenshots of that
We
because
did.
I can't even
But I can't
Did you send
screenshot it.
Oh, you can't screenshot.
Because it's rejected. It never happened before. I say the
It's
last.
automatically rejecting the report for you?
Yes, I don't know if I'm hitting the button by mistake. You know, it's very sensitive because I click it and then it reject is right underneath it
Okay.
on the screen, so it rejects. It used to be moved over more.
I'll ask them.
Thank you.
Let's talk, okay?
Thank you.
Steve, I just want to mention that on the top 10 report list, the second one there is project cost detail report. It was just put into production last night. Actually, we haven't announced it yet. But this one is a report for the managed expenditure screen for projects. And it should run, so it's the second one, they're PJ 073. And it's out there with a title called Beta New PJ 073 because all new reports are going out there with that title. But it's been fully tested and it's out there so that should help you with the project costs. And you can narrow down your parameters there.
I'm also going to add that I've seen that slowness when you scroll down and manage expenditure items as well. We should log that as a service request with Oracle because it shouldn't take that long to scroll down. I agree. So
Sure.
we'll log that with Oracle and see if they can fix it.
Thanks, Tom.
I had another question. You guys recently did a survey regarding the rollout of this. Was there any plans to share the results of that survey?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, when can we expect that?
I think that it's being processed, and I'll be reviewing it soon, and then we'll be posting it. Back behind there.
Now, expense report, is there a place that we can actually look at an expense report if we didn't approve it? Let's say, right now, if you don't approve it, you can't see it. You can only see piecemeal, like by each line item. Is there a place that we can look at, like somebody else approved it, but I want to see the whole expense report in one place, the way they submit it? Is there a place that to look? Yeah, it's
I'm not
weird.
exactly sure I understand what you mean.
Yeah, like if I approve the expense report, I can see the expense report,
Mhm.
full expense report. But if somebody else approved it, I cannot see it. The only thing I can see is you can search it. It tells you this is the expense report. When you drill into it, you can see line by line, but not the, you have to go a lot of places to get all the information together. So I don't know if if I need to go somewhere else. It's just.
Get an example.
Because for audit purposes, some of our grant require us to print everything for them, and it's been really, because if I approve it,
Let's talk. I want to see
Yeah.
if we can walk through with
Yeah.
my computer, okay?
Sure.
All right.
Other questions? Did we hit everything on the question list? Let's see. So we did have some questions come in advance. I want to make sure that we hit them all. Oh, there was a question about there was a question about can the university explore the possibility of having the department chair be financially responsible for his or her department, control over department finances, billing, collect, and having a department administrator. That's not a system issue. And under responsibility center management, each chancellor and then the deans with the chancellor are responsible for the structure, and we know that schools have different organizational structures and financial responsibility structures under those. That's not something that is centrally managed. It's actually different even under one single chancellor. So that is something that would have to be, for whoever put that in there, would have to be taken up with the respective chancellor's CFO or office. Okay, there was a question about reports. Let's see, I think we did that one. I think we did that one. Do you see any more, Stephanie, that we didn't cover? Oh yeah, there was somebody who was looking, somebody put in a question regarding where can faculty and staff find detailed financial statements. You can find those on the controller's website, and you can get to those by going to finance.rutgers.edu. There is a place where you can download audited financial statements that go back years and years and years. And the latest one was from last June, obviously, because we haven't done them statements yet. But those are on the controller's website and can get through finance.rutgers.edu to get to that. And then click on the controller's office. I think that was, we got them all. What's that? Yeah, the questions and the answers to the questions will be posted along with the slides from today. Okay, any last questions? We'll be happy to stick around too. All right, well, thank you very much.